She's the most influential radio talk show host in all of Wisconsin, and we love her. So come on up, Vicki.
I need a timer because I can go long. You know, you put 2 talk show hosts on a panel. People, do you really think you're getting out on time? Get serious. I may hit this thing every night. This is just like Uber and Lyft are wonderful free market solutions to problems. This is an e-cigarette. You guys know what these things are? The government's trying to make sure nobody can get their hands on these things. Pack and a half a day smoker, 23 years, till this. And the government wants to take this away from me. You see why we talk about the government so often. The government is the problem. I have 2 shows, actually. I have a show that is based out of Madison, and that show is a afternoon drive time show that goes statewide. So Madison, Eau Claire, La Crosse, up in the boonies in Ashland County, where prior to talk radio out of Madison, they were getting all of their news and information out of Minnesota. Does not help a lot to Wisconsin people. And then I have a show as well in the midday in Milwaukee. I am lucky that I have access to 2 audiences that are some of the most activist-minded audiences anywhere in the country. Without talk radio in Wisconsin, Scott Walker, our governor, wouldn't have been elected in the first place, and he wouldn't have been reelected in a recall. And if he is elected, and I pray he is, in this next round, it will be because of the activist audiences of talk radio. It is not always the case that audiences of talk radio are activist audiences, because the first goal of radio is to entertain. The second goal of talk radio is to educate. Activism doesn't ever have to play into the equation. I've been paying attention, and I wanted to do talk radio a long time. And so I had, looked at guys like Rush and Sean and all the great ones. And I said, I've got to do something that's not just a female version of them. I've got to not just replicate what they're doing in a different time slot. What do? Well, I lived in Madison. And when I got on the air in Madison, in the talk capacity, the very first issue we were dealing with in Madison was a proposal for a trolley in Madison, Wisconsin. And I don't know if it was just sort of innate in me. I used to be a Marxist, by the way, but I don't know if it was an innate in me that I had to do something. So here's this inane proposal for, I don't know how many people. Madison's 220,000 people. It's a college town. It's not dense. It's not concentrated. We're all over the place. You got an isthmus that narrows the passages of transportation between 2 lakes. You've got constrained one-way streets, hardly any parking. You can barely get bicycles down some of the streets. And these inane morons want to put a trolley in existing road capacity, not build additional space to run a trolley, but no, existing roadway capacity that is already difficult enough to manage as it is. So it struck me that nobody was really paying attention to some of the functional problems of a trolley in Madison. It's 2003. Functional problem. Everybody understood the cost problems, and there were lots of good people working on the spreadsheets and working on the graphs and saying it's unsustainable, that we are going to see the build out in terms of capital costs, which were never presented to the public, be wildly out of control with what has been predicted. The tax bills were going to go up. But the real issue for my audience was going to be how to get from point A to point B when you've got this gigantic machine that in the wintertime in Wisconsin will freeze solid to the tracks. So that's where I started. What was the functional impact on average people? And in 2000, I was swinging it. I was shooting from the hip. I had barely come out of the fugue of Marxism at that point. I had spent many times, trying to right myself by being an activist Democrat before I, sort of got my head out of my butt. So that's what we started to focus on. We had a hush puppy sort of gee-aw shucks, nice guy, progressive mayor, nice guy. Everybody from Madison, Dave Cheslevich was a nice guy. But his vision was to take away our choices, and his belief was taking away our choices freed us from our responsibility for those choices, and so it really was freedom. But it was the functional impact of that trolley that allowed us to organize actions against the trolley. So here's and it's not difficult to do this when you've got something that concrete. So we had a crime problem in Madison. We had some neighborhoods that had been overrun by the invitation of people who were seeking subsidized housing into our city from Chicago. This is still a problem for Madison. But as the gang problem began to rise in a city of 220,000, it's noticeable in a city of 220,000 when there's gang activity. We had lots and lots of neighborhoods that went into sort of a crisis situation, one particularly on the west side of the city. And we called a community meeting, not just because we were interested in fighting back against the gang encroachments, but because the mayor put the trolley ahead of public safety. Piece of cake. That's what, when we talk about messaging, what we do poorly as conservatives is put everything in the sky. We put everything in the clouds. We make it all about spreadsheets. We make graphs, and they're great, and I love them because I'm into that stuff. But when it comes to motivating body A from the couch to action, you have to give them a reason to do it, and you have to walk them through it in a way, as insulting as this may sound, that devolves a complicated issue to something that can fit on the back of a small car on a bumper sticker. As simplistic as it is, that's what you have to do in terms of activism. We were successful in pushing back against the trolley. There's this new urbanism vision for a sustainable vision for Madison, but it wasn't just the trolley. So Dave Cheslevich, the mayor, trolley's gone. Kathleen Falk, the county executive, comes forward with a commuter rail proposal. So we're kind of like this. We know how to fight the trolley. We know exactly how to fight the trolley. And what it is juxtapose that issue against what is not being done in terms of other things that everybody, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, communists, atheists, and believers, all believe is important in their lives. Their tax bill, whether there are potholes that have not been plugged that are the size of German shepherds in the middle of the roadways that they need to use, stoplights that haven't been maintained, snowplow service that is late to coming in a 12-inch dumper in the middle of Wisconsin. So we knew what we had to do, but again, we're up against power bases and very well-funded lobbyists. So it wasn't quite as easy as it was to push back against the trolley. In the case of the trolley, we put 800 people in a church screaming about crime with the mayor, and everybody walks up to the microphone and says, hey, we don't need a trolley, we need more cops. Right? Not quite as easy to fight back against the commuter rail proposal because that was all being done behind the scenes. Enter people like Bill Richardson, who's sitting in front of me, Eileen Bruskowitz, who's sitting to my left. You should be sitting to my right because you're actually to the right of me. And what they did was they took this concept of idea to activism, of complicated to simple, and they crafted a mechanism of getting through to people. I'm not going to spend I could spend 2 hours talking about it. But here's the simple thing that happened for the commuter rail, which was going to be $1 billion. Again, the numbers were all on our side, just like John Charles last night was talking about. All the numbers were on our side, but it didn't matter how rational our position was. Bill Richardson, Eileen Bruskowitz, another few great people. 160 different times a day, the train would stop traffic. The commuter rail in Madison, Wisconsin would stop traffic. Remember what I described in terms of the constraint of road capacity in the first place. 2 lakes, narrow isthmus, and then, very constraining small, old one-way streets. They're going to put trains stopping traffic. So what did they do? Well, this is really tough because there's millions and millions of dollars and well-paid lobbyists, and we've got, people who, know people who are running deals behind the scenes. They took big placards that said train, T-R-A-I-N, train. And then they took 160, the number 160, and then an X. And they went to stoplights and they marched, pushed the walk button, and they walked slowly across the stoplights. And it said train 160 times a day. Anybody, I don't care if you were the most complete committed leftist, said to themselves, hell no, hell no. It took a little bit beyond just those signs. They then had to organize some advisory referenda, and that's neither here nor there. But that was the key. That was the key that unlocked the box of comprehension. It was a partnership, again, between the messaging that they were able to get out on my show, partnering with local activists in order to make sure everybody knew, all right, everybody, it's going to be at East Johnson Street. All right, it's going to be downtown on State Street. So we partnered together with this idea that you make sure messaging can be processed at a very, very simple level. Kitchen table is the old phrase, whatever you want to call it, bar, I don't care. Wherever you understand your life, that is where you've got to meet people on transportation, on sustainability issues. You've got to think about where they are. Do they really care? If I'm looking at Ms. Morose here, your presentation was phenomenal, by the way. But, you know, when you're talking about affirmatively furthering fair housing, for instance, you need to tell people what it's going to look like next door. What does it look like next door when HUD takes away zoning authority from local governments and decides that your neighborhood is too white or your neighborhood is too middle class? I'll tell you what it looks like in Madison, because they've been doing that for 35 years without HUD telling them to do it. And it looks like the West Side districts that became overrun with crime. That's what it looks like when they decided that middle-income people needed to be living next to people who were generationally dependent on welfare. It looks like something. It feels like something. The life experience is very, very different than what it looks like on a spreadsheet or what it looks like in a PowerPoint. That's where we typically don't do that well. We love charts. We love data. But in terms of just getting to people where they are, that's where I think talk radio has been, at least in Wisconsin, has been incredibly useful. So that's Madison. But Milwaukee is another city, and it's another interesting place. I also have a show in Milwaukee. I'm the land use girl, by the way, on the radio. I am it. Nobody else talks about land use. I just think it's cool. I mean, I just think it's nuts, but cool and very dangerous. So in Milwaukee, they were dealing with the same things. In Milwaukee, there was a proposal for a trolley. There still is a proposal for a trolley. In Milwaukee, there was a proposal for what I was calling cow speed rail, 58-mile-an-hour high-speed rail that was going to take someone from nowhere in Milwaukee County to nowhere in Dane County, but it was going to cost us several $billion in terms of the capital cost. Happily, we had a candidate for governor who was willing to put the kibosh on that, but in order for him to adopt that as an issue, so beyond directly influencing people, you also want to directly influence candidates. Scott Walker is a great governor, but Scott Walker, when he was running for governor the first time, could have given a damn about the train. It was the activist push from talk radio in Milwaukee. It was the citizens saying, you mean to tell me that we're going to make sure a bunch of guys who, you know, can afford to drive Ferraris, lobbyists are going to be able to hop a train from, would lobbyists have hopped a train from Madison to Milwaukee? No, they weren't going to. I mean, nobody was going to ride the damn train. But we made, because it was so expensive, we made it sound like the only people who could afford to ride that train were lobbyists who would actually be able to afford a Ferrari payment every month. And we beat it and we beat it and we beat it. And do you want to be the Republican that wants to stand with the guys who drive Ferraris to give them tax money to ride a train? Scott Walker grabbed the issue as a candidate, committed to eliminate the dollars and the approval for that train, and did so when he became governor. But it was because of the activist push, again, driven by talk media in Milwaukee, that was able to push that up the ladder. I think a lot of you have probably noticed how that's worked with Common Core. I don't know how many of you are into that issue. From zero saturation of interest and knowledge a year ago in our state to 80% activist engagement in Wisconsin in 1 year. The candidates now are all campaigning on it, just like the trains, just like the trolleys. They're campaigning on it. That's what you can do. So it's not just about, you know, going out and telling people that, and you need to do that. It's about getting the activists to actually have an influence on the people who ultimately will call the shots in government. Because we do not have a direct democracy here. We have a representative system. You want your representative to put on his or her list of the 5 most important things, the 5 most important things that matter to you. In order to make that happen, you have to make sure a whole bunch of other people consider those 5 things the most important things to them and are willing to make sure they express their influence. It's not a direct line. It's not A to B. It isn't talk radio to success. It's talk radio to motivation, to activism, to messaging, to influence. And we are absolutely key to that, at least for the time being until they kill off radio. Our medium is absolutely key to that. Something else, and I know I've only got 4 minutes left, that what I have noticed that has actually helped me to force multiply my message is the partnership that I have developed with, I don't know what you guys want to call it anymore. I still call it the Tea Party community. But with the activist, libertarian, conservative, or conservatarian, however whatever, if you like labels, I don't give a darn. Whatever the people are out there that still want to be part of that liberty movement that recreates government with liberty as the model of government is social media. And it is the partnership with small groups and individual citizens that I have also developed with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of these, even Pinterest. All of these different instant sharing communication technologies have allowed me to go from having a show on in a market to having influence well beyond my market, beyond my 2 hours in the midday and 3 hours in the afternoon, and to be part of an ongoing activist conversation, to essentially micro-target our messaging, issue to issue. If I can't spend 45 minutes on it on the air, I can still be part of the changing the conversation on the ground, even when I'm not opening up a microphone. So that's something that our folks also are, our young people are very good at it, but to begin to harness that amazing technology, to become a force multiplier of our message is something that is absolutely critical. And I have done that with my show. It's one of the reasons my show grew as quickly as it did in Milwaukee. I came on in Milwaukee in 2007. So into a market that was hyper competitive, very easy to wash out in that market, by the way. Easy to have a failure of a program launch in that market. So what I did was seized upon any kind of force multiplication effort, be it word of mouth or meetings or, God bless, social media comes online. So don't just walk away and say, I don't do Facebook, I don't do Twitter, I don't do any of these things. That's for my kids. It's not for your kids. It's the future of how we are ultimately going to communicate, organize, and activate our people on our issues. I could go on and on and on. We got a million issues in Wisconsin we're dealing with, not the least of which is trying to get our guy over the hump again in the third election in 2 years that we've had for our governor. See, I want to leave you with this. The left is like carpenter ants. You can kill them, and they still come back. Build that nest over and over again, which is why you want to make your activism part of your everyday life. The way you do that is to make you, yourself, and people understand how it always is. Everything the government does affects you from the time you turn on the lights, the Energy Star rating on your light bulb, to the paint color on your wall, for the VOC content in the paint, to the amount of solar and wind renewable energy you're paying for in your electric bill, to the catalytic converter on your car, to how wide your streets are, to whether you have a sidewalk, and whether you have curb and gutter, to whether there's a crime. Everything the government does, from Washington to your state capital to your city government, affects you every single day. And if you can understand that and find a way to talk about your belief and your activism every single day, I guarantee you the left does, we can be a lot more successful in this. I will do my part to continue to help. I'm not arrogant enough to think I know everything. I take all ideas, I take all comers, and we have had some noteworthy success, but we're certainly not done, not by a long shot, and the left will never give us a break. So thank you very much for the time today.